Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today, some of the topics, I would say life in general, how we can, Kevin has a good initiative about home buying, a good new idea for home buying for enabling people to buy homes, and education. Charlie, where do you want to start?
Uh, well, we can talk about, the education is fine. I don't really have a whole lot on my mind specifically, but we can get it going.
Let,
When you brought up education, were you talking about higher education? You talking about education in general?
So I have three initiatives. I have higher education. One of the things I'm enjoying is the fact that I have my kids in prepaid college, and I'm trying to see if there's any interest from anyone that I talk to about a national prepaid college program. Because my program only applies to Florida for my kids, and it does seem like they're venturing outside of Florida. So I would love to see some sort of way to create a national where you could literally use that, get that same benefit. So Florida's is basically you're freezing the rate at the time you enroll, in prepaid. We're not really doing that if he goes to Cincinnati, which I think he's gonna one of my oldest is gonna wind up. But I like to see that. The other initiative I had on mind was a national public school Montessori system because I do think a lot of kids don't don't get the education they need simply because they're lost in the traditional K through 12 system, and they do need Montessori to get them
does,
going.
does Florida still have, and I forgot the name of it. It's crazy because I've been out of education for over 15 years now, but the program, where it's essentially you're guaranteed full tuition to a Florida state school. Remember that program?
I do remember that.
Wildly, but what was the name? I forgot the name of it. Now you're not guaranteed any specific one, so like most of them want to go to University of Florida or
Or
FSU,
FSU.
but you could end up in University of West Florida. They're all decent schools, but the program, as I remember, I just forget the name of it. It was vastly popular. They kept kind of changing. They kept moving the goalposts a little bit. What was required of the students. It was, there was a GPA minimum. There was certain courses you had to take. I have to say, surprisingly, it was kind of like a model program though, because you've got some really good schools, which already for residents are rock bottom prices as compared to other schools. I mean, I look at UF, even their law school. My tuition was like around 20 grand a year, as compared to say University of Miami, which was around 60 at the time, and I think it's around 80 or 90 now. But I think their undergrad is similar comparisons, where it's like a third of what most private universities are. And then on top of that, it's absolutely free for the students who complete this program. But I don't know where it's at. I know they had funding issues because that's why they kept kind of moving the goalpost, because there was only so much they could afford. Because initially it wasn't tremendous. It really wasn't. Like it was something like maybe a 3.0 grade point average. Certain courses you had to do like not a real heavy requirement of a community service project. Really, you just had to show up and participate, and you could go to school. You could go to school for free. But the value of higher education is changed so much now because of the way the job economy works. It was already trending in that direction when I went to, when I first went to college, over 30 years ago. And it seems to continue now where these kids just struggle so much, and the environment has changed so much, especially I think about coding, that was the thing for so many years. Like, oh man, these kids are learning. Your kid learns to code and you'll have a job forever. And like overnight with AI, it's like, no, actually there'll be no jobs. AI will be doing all its own coding. Sorry about that. Find a new job. I feel like if your main concern, which it's sad, it shouldn't be. In a perfect world, your main concern wouldn't be you do college just for a job. You go to become a well-rounded, educated, contributing member of society. Sadly, that's just not the case, except for the privileged few. It's like, well, if it's not connected to me getting a job after 4 years or so, then like it's worthless. And so for the young people that I talk to, I would say, listen, man, dude, if that's your main concern, and probably should be, probably do something. At some point you got to be using your hands on something. That if it's a completely hands-off type of endeavor with AI, you're always going to be in danger of just being taken over. So you gotta look at what the job environment is. That's why, I'm big on trade schools, tech schools. We need more we still need more welders. We still need more aerospace, people working in the field, actually, constructing things and running big factories and stuff like that.
Well, that's a huge point. Welcome, Kevin. I'm glad to see you made it. We're waiting on Beth, but we jumped right in.
Oh, absolutely. No, I was loving what Charlie was saying. I think that's deep analysis. I caught the back end of it, but yeah, welcome guys. I'm sorry for being late. I was sitting there having my morning coffee with my lovely lady, Nikki and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, you get lost in it. And I'm like, oh my God, the crew is waiting.
No, we knew Beth is coming too. I'm sure she'll be here soon. I was the one that ran late one, and I'm the host. I guess you would say I'm the podcaster, but I ran late one day. Charlie made this great point about education that and then comes the idea that AI. It's just like he said, medical coding. I think it was
No, no,
a big.
I was talking about computer coding. I was talking about
Computer coding
Yes,
was a
yes.
big deal, was a big initiative. I
It
remember
used
I
to
was
be.
telling somebody when I was a kid, I remember in a grade school they walked us down to this new room and they had computers. It was a computer lab and they said someday everyone will have a computer in their home. I mean, that's how far back I go in the public education system. And now, like Charlie said, everything's changed. And how do we, when you think of a college degree, just like Charlie said, it does make you a more well-rounded person. It definitely makes you a person that's able to communicate and multitask and really face challenges. Education is a huge challenge, especially when you're no longer home with your parents pushing you. Not all kids have that, but when you have that, it's a key driver in a lot of kids' success. But and then I had just mentioned one of the things I recently spoke to a lady. Her name is Dr. Nelva Lee. She did the podcast. She's a Republican conservative candidate for a Georgia school superintendent. She had some great points, and one of the points she had said, Charlie was an educator before being a lawyer, right? You were doing a lot with education.
School teacher for 10 years back.
10 years. And one of the things she had mentioned is in Mississippi, they had initiated a public school Montessori system. And they ultimately became 30 in the country. They're around number three now, because Montessori does give a lot of kids the sort of hands-on they need without, and when they're not able to function in your traditional lower grades. So that was just one of the things I was saying. Kevin, jump in and let's just talk about, like, the other thing Charlie had just said is about college doesn't necessarily set you up for success anymore. You could very well be college educated and still, and like people say it all, like Charlie was a teacher and then a lawyer. So education serves those needs. If you want to be in the medical field, you have to be educated. But when it comes to certain other things where you're just getting a general business degree, AI is replacing a lot of that stuff.
Well, the process has been going on for a long time. And as I said, like, it was already in this position over 30 years ago. When I graduated in 94 from Boston University, even the students who, I'm not talking about the students who went in and got, degrees in women's studies or, African American history or art or all these things that get criticized all the time of a waste of time because there's no jobs. I'm talking friends who were in the business program, like very few of them had jobs when they graduated. My father went to Notre Dame. He was an English major. He didn't study business specifically. He was an English major at Notre Dame, and he was in the military as well. But it was nothing directly specifically at what he did. But the field was wide open for intelligent people, well-rounded people with an education to really go into lots of fields. And then over the years, it's really, really narrowed. And nothing worse than, especially the students have to pay it all on their own, take on all the debt on their own, and you get done with 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, and there's not a job waiting for you. That's just a horrible reality, but that is the reality. And again, that's why I always, I think it's sad that you have to do this, but whenever I'm, trying to coach or mentor younger people, I'm like, you've got to be realistic. What is the job market for what you're studying? Is there going to be a very good chance you get a job? That's why I always push technical school, because we can point and say we need this, But again, even this, we need this stuff isn't bulletproof. And that's why I brought up coding, because for years it was like, hey, listen, man, you learn to code and you can program computers, there's always going to be a job for you. And then with AI, it seemed like overnight, it was like, no, not anymore. AI does its own coding, move on. It's like, for years we were telling them that's the safest thing, that's the most responsible thing you can do. And so it's so tricky for them out there now. And, we just don't, we can't think about higher education the way we used to, sadly, because other than like the fortunate few who have enough money and family money where they can really just go pursue an education in general and be enlightened and learn and meet different people. It's a wonderful thing. It's just not available for the majority of people. There's the reality that you're going to have bills and you're going to have these student loans, and damn, there better be a good paying job at the end, or you're just you're looking at a very, very difficult road.
I hear you, Charlie. I do. I think that the lesson from the actual economy where the jobs actually create and exist is that the best thing that our children can do, the best thing each of us can do, is have the kind of education that allows us to be as flexible as possible, that allows us to adapt. The problem with preparing for a career path, a job path, whatever that is that as the economy changes, you don't have the ability to transition, right? My only concern, I agree that right now, in the trades, right, it seems less replaceable. But if the lesson of let's say the last 50 years is just how replaceable
Oh
the
yeah.
things that appear to be unreplaceable are,
Mhm.
the only mitigation for that is the kind of education that helps you to think, that helps you to analyze critically, that helps you to adapt, um, problem solve, that helps you, life is continuous education. In other words, so we need to get back to a scholarship like thing. Like when you talked about your dad in his English degree at Notre Dame, right? When I was at Invesco Capital Management, an institutional asset management firm based in Atlanta, right? One of my favorite portfolio managers, these are people who are investing billions of dollars, on behalf of pension funds or whatever. And you look at their backgrounds, and absolutely right, liberal arts degrees and stuff like that. There is a value with understanding how with training to mind, to learn, to solve problems, to critically analyze, because in the absence of that kind of foundation, right, what you wind up with is I know how to do A. And as soon as A is not valuable, there's very little I can take from what I know how to do in A and transfer it to what is available. That is what that to me, this is the secret sauce. And the problem with our university system, for example, is over the last 40 years, it has progressively moved from scholarship to here's the beeline to get into the cubicle somewhere, right? And that's supposed to lead to the job, and you got your headphones on and you're doing this thing, and you're off to the races you go. But the problem is all those opportunities start fading away, start getting displaced by technology and innovation. I just so where does that leave us, right? Because at the end of the day, they still have to function, we still have to function, right? And
Well, the cost is such a big issue too, because it's so ridiculous. It's so out of touch, out of place. With the availability of information the way it is now, the
yes,
idea that you have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get the same information you can get
yep,
from your phone, basically, just
yep,
because this professor or this professor is the one that's giving you the information. Now, I've had some amazing lecture professors, but they were not the norm, right? Even the most
yeah,
even the most accomplished ones, most of the time, not really great teachers. Some great teachers where it was worth the money. The lecture was worth the damn money. They were that good at imparting the education, at getting you fired up and interested in what they were doing. I mean, there's still a value there, but it's few and far between. And so when you're paying $75,000, $85,000 a year tuition, just because this person has this letter and this letter but next to their name, or written this paper, it's ridiculous. And it makes the gamble so much harder, right? You know, if you're not throwing away hundreds of $1,000s, you go for, you may waste a little time, but you're not in debt for the rest of your life. And you learn a few things. It hasn't saddled you for the rest of your life. But like you said, if you pay all that money to go from point A to point B because it's going to give you that job, well, we can't even imagine exactly. Like I said, I never thought coding would just disappear overnight. Who would have predicted that? So yeah, I agree. I think the only realistic solution is make it dirt cheap, as it probably should be, so they can learn. Because these universities are just, they're turning into like criminal enterprises. I swear, it's ridiculous. The endowments and all the money, and then they turn it into this baseline that, well, if you don't have this degree from this type of university, that alone is what keeps you from getting these jobs. It's not about ability or knowledge. It's about I went to Harvard Law, I went to Harvard Business, or whatever, insert name of ridiculously expensive university. University of Miami, like I said, University of Miami Law School. I mean, it's a middling, maybe 55th rank typically a year. It's like 65 grand a year. Why? Because University of Miami, a lot of connections in the legal world in Miami, but you're not getting any better knowledge. You're not getting any better teaching. So it's kind of like it's a scam.
So ultimately, if you go to University of Miami, and I'm asking a question now, if you go to the University of Miami Law School, you're more inclined to get a good job simply because of the connections you made in that education system, in that particular college. In Miami.
But it's specific. It's so regional. It's very regional. That's why. So the top tiers, like if you go, again, I don't bore everyone with law, but you go to Harvard Law, that reach isn't regional. That's everywhere, right? Or you go to Northwestern, or any of these top tier schools that just have their connections throughout the world. You are paying for that. A lot of them, it's regional, especially in the South. The South, it's very regional. It's like, same thing with University of Florida, University of Alabama, things like that. Great schools can get you a long way connection-wise in the Southeast, but it's somewhat limited beyond that. But again, I just think the cost is just crazy. And it's so easy for these kids to get these loans, get them at such a young age where they have no idea what they're taking on. I think they have more of an idea now because of the crisis of so many people. It's more out there now, but for years it was kind of like a secret. People didn't realize it until they started getting that bill. But 18 is a really young age to take on hundreds of $1,000s of debt.
And be saddled with it your whole life. And be saddled with it your whole life. And then,
they push it on, It's like,
this is how we bankrupted the millennials. The millennial generation was the generation that found out that doing the six-figure education was indentured servitude, because ultimately the job wasn't there for them. By the time Gen Z came in, they already saw what happened to the millennials. They already saw it's not working. And so the young people like our friend, was it Quiz? Not Quiz.
Quez,
right. No, they're not. Okay. The span of them. I mean, I have two daughters and two sons, and they're getting their skill development off the gravy train of getting formalized education, but at that high cost, because the jobs are not there. Just, whether you're saying that, in other words, I would still say I would never recommend, and Charlie, you got your law degree, I got my law degree. I would never recommend to anyone anyone who could hear my voice, right, that you go ahead and invest the six figures in this economy in an education that is targeted specifically for a certain type of career. No, what the investment needs to be, what is going to help me to be as flexible as the market is, because the market is constantly changing. It is evolving at an increasingly rapid rate, and your ability to add value within that context is based on how flexible you are, how quickly you can transition, your capacity to learn on the go and keep it moving and stuff like that. Whatever helps you to do that is the skill development you need. And
And the ability
but
to be like to take on the technology, embrace it, and be creative enough. I was looking at this list of like the wealthiest like business people in terms of using the internet. Right, number one, value of his personal wealth value, $500 million, the Mr. Beast guy. Right? Number two, the 14-year-old. He basically started by reviewing toys. Now, obviously, his parents helped set him up, but he's 14. His net, I can't, what the term is, net value, whatever the term is, it's like 240 million. But just found, someone, him and his parents, whoever, found an angle using the internet, using social media to just generate insane amounts of wealth from creativity, pure creativity, really. It's an amazing thing, but I don't know. Can you teach that? I don't know how much of that you can teach.
So to all those points comes my moonshot. So that's what I started. Charlie had started off with in Florida. It used to be if you graduate Florida high school and you do certain things like Charlie said, a part of it I think was community service. A part of it was a GPA of around 3%, 3.0. Then you were guaranteed a spot in a community college. No one knew where. And
Well, it's not a community college, it's state university.
State
You're
universities.
guaranteed full tuition at one of the Florida, FSU, UF, University of West Florida, University of Southern Florida. I think there's like 6 of them, but you are guaranteed one of them. Not your choice, but
Right.
like I said, the bar was not real high to, you really just had to put the work in and show up to school every day and do a little community service. Now, again, I'm sure it's changed because it was going bankrupt 15 years ago when I was still teaching high school. So I can't forget the name of it. I don't even know if it exists anymore. I'm sure it doesn't exist in the model it used to be.
I'm just wondering if it's the Bright Futures program now, if that's what
Yeah,
it
it
turned
is Bright
into.
Futures. It was Bright Futures.
Yeah. And then, but now the Bright Futures is entirely different than that. It has transitioned.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess you could say, I guess we're agreeing it was always called the Bright Futures program, right?
It was. Yeah.
And then, and when it was what you just said, it's no longer that. My kids are a part of Bright Futures. It's just it's just a reduction in cost now.
Yeah.
Is all it is. It's just a reduction.
It was going in that direction, like I said, 15 years ago. It just wasn't sustainable. The only thing they could do was to make the standards higher, and then then that became its own infighting, and that brought up suggestions of racial inequality in terms of the testing and things like that. And so it was already starting to become a mess, when I stopped teaching. But I knew it wasn't going to. I knew it didn't exist in its own form. But when it was there, like I said, it was an amazing. It was an amazing thing, man. Those kids were really set up for free tuition. A lot of times, a full package, room and board.
Yeah, and then so my moonshot was like when I was talking to Dr. Nelva Lee, the candidate for Georgia's, said she is a Republican conservative candidate for Georgia's superintendent spot. She was talking about all these things about having vocational schools as an option in high school, and not just a plumber or a carpenter, but also the kind of thing we were talking about, which was like medical coding or computer coding, which is obsolete at this point. But she was talking about certain office works too. I was just saying when we talk about Bright Futures, I would love to see that be on a national level, and you apply those credits anywhere in the country. And granted, again, it comes down to cost, but the investment would be we would have a huge return on the investment, and life skills and the idea that you're able to adapt to a changing economy, teaching kids from a young age that you probably may not have the career you hoped for your whole life. Like you said, computer coding is going away. AI is it's really taken away a lot of things, really. I mean, I'm not an English major, and if I need to write an email now, I go to AI. They do a good job often with us with trying to put things together and thoughts together and really sound articulate. Years ago, that really took a skilled person, and that's now sort of been replaced by AI. So we've got to make our kids able to adapt. And the other issue is, like we said, if they're saddled with 300 grand in debt going into the workplace, that eliminates their ability to buy a home initially. I mean, or invest in something worthwhile initially. They're already saddled with who knows what the number is. I'm using 300,000 as a figure, but I imagine it is that. And then, so how do we get past that? How do we, I, something something I had mentioned before about housing is Kevin's got a great idea on that, but what about a great idea on education? How do we enable our kids to succeed these days?
I tell you, Coach, I just think that all of this that we're talking about, whether we're talking about how we educate our kids and how it's improving their lives, right? Or, like what careers, what choices, right? All this is within the context of an economics that's no longer working. I mean, and we need to, and where am I coming from with that? Okay, this week is, as we know, but next Sunday, a week from today, is Super Bowl Sunday, right? Now stick with me for a minute, right? And because I think that the political no-brainer podcast, should participate in this, right? Because this is what I'm doing on breadcrumbs this week. I'm preparing my episode because Super Bowl week is here, and the idea is that we have created a circumstance where we take these incredible virtues and lessons that we gain from how we play, from competitive athletics, right? The virtue of competition, and how it sharpens your sword, how it allows you through this process to build character, to build skills, to do all those type of things. And it's modeled so beautifully in competitive athletics. The problem is that when you take it from competitive athletics, where nothing, let me be clear, nothing is actually on the line. You're just playing a game, right? And so the competition is only making you better at playing the game. But if you don't play the game as good as someone else, it doesn't mean that you can't eat. Okay. Taking those principles and off the field and into real life, where the basis by which you have the house that you're sitting in, the basis by which all of us take care of ourselves and our family, is how well we compete against each other. It converts the competition into a blood sport where it becomes a life and death situation, where the thing that separates us is literally our wins and losses. The primary difference between the billionaire class and the person holding a sign on the street is their wins and losses. I mean, just look at how do you make your money? How do I make my money? We make our money by defeating somebody. Right. Okay. But the people that we defeat, it's having an impact, just like it has an impact on us when we don't get the deal, when we don't get the job. Right. Okay. And so what I'm saying, so a data point that distills what I'm talking about is US life expectancy. It is at the point where, if you look at the latest life expectancy data by income, okay, every category of income level, from the bottom 1% of earners in the country to the top 1% of earners in the country, every category is now, the if you the next higher level of income lives longer than the lower level of income through the entire spectrum. Now, for the whole spectrum in the United States, comparing the bottom 1% of earners to the top 1% of earners, for men, there's a 14-year difference. And for women, there's a almost 11-year difference. Okay. And the thing is, but again, it goes, and I'll be specific. The bottom 1% of earners in the country, men live 72.7 years, and women live 78.8 years. Right. The top 1%, men live 87.3 years and women live 88.9 years, right? As I said, it's like 10 years for women, 10, 11 years for women, 14 years for men. But the bottom, but even when you compare it against the 50% mark, 50% earners and below, men live 80.2 years. So they live 7 years shorter than men who earn in the top 1%. and women live 84.1 years or 5 years shorter, literally. Okay, this is what we're down to. And that of all the differences between income levels and life expectancy, the one that has the biggest gap is the difference between the top 1% and the top 5%. Right. So I mean that just think about that. So I mean this is so even at the top 5%, men live 84.7 years, right? Compared to the top 1% is 87.3 years, right? So 2.5 years shorter if you're in the top 5% than in the top 1%. There is no increase as big as that one. This is how much, the implications of this is that that in the competition, taking the virtue out of competitive athletics and putting it into the real economy and saying the way you take care of yourselves and your family is that you compete against each other in order to earn a living, right? That process out here is actually driving how long we live. And the reason why is the price for losing is living a harder and a shorter life. This is where we are. And that process is literally destroying the social fabric of the country. Because if everything that stands in the way of you taking care of yourself and your family is the fact that everyone else you're dealing with is trying to do the same thing, you can't be thinking in terms of that's my fellow man, that's my fellow woman. I hope they're going to be okay. Why? Because as it gets tighter, as it gets tighter, as it gets harder, which it is, right? You become desperate just to take care of yourself and your family. And this is where we are. Why is there so much vitriol? Why is the educational system not producing anything? Why aren't we all benefiting, getting the lion's share of the benefit from AI and technological development? Because the people who innovate those things are taking most of the benefit and leaving us scrapping for the scraps on the side, right? In other words, if we know so much more today than we knew 50 years ago. Why is life harder for the average person? Because they're just being exploited, because they're losing the competition, because all the benefit is going to you know, that top 1%, right? We got to break that cycle. Or how about this? It's going to break itself. It's going to break itself. People are checking out of the system. The free market is not working for most people anymore, right? And the thing, and it's because the market is not free, because access to skills are not available, because everyone is not benefiting. All boats are not lifting. The invisible hand is broken. Right. Okay. So that's I just put that out there. It's stuff
Well,
like
and I
that.
appreciate. I think it's a beautiful way you looked at it, especially when you look at wealth being the way you live a longer life and obviously a healthier life, because health is wealth and wealth is health. Now we're saying. So, the idea
But it's
is that
not. That is a false, it is not. It is the fact that if that your access to quality food, that your access to housing, that your access to all the good things that support wellness is a function of your capacity to pay. That is
absolutely. But here's the
that
thing.
is medieval. That is medieval. That is beyond that. This what is the virtue of having information that you could share universally and that would benefit everybody? But instead of sharing it universally, you only share it to people who can pay, and then deny everyone else the information, so therefore they can't benefit. That's what we're doing in everything. In everything. People in the top 1% are not living longer because they have better biology. They're living longer because they benefit from the best, the accumulation of human knowledge. If we know how to do it, they can get it. And most of us don't have access to the things we know how to do. We don't have access to the best quality of anything, right? Because our capacity, the quality that we can access is based on how much we can pay. And so therefore we feed people stuff that causes their life to end early, that causes diabetes, that causes obesity, that causes, I mean, it's look at the society, right? Right. Why? Because people are making a fortune feeding people shit. Right.
No, right. So to that point, or if you want to jump in, because I do want to jump in, but Charlie, do you want to jump in first?
No, go ahead.
So, like I said, I summarized it briefly, and I don't know that we agree on that, but I feel like if you're healthy, you're wealthy. I feel like so we're saying health is wealth. That's the old saying.
Yes,
Now
I
we're
agree with that.
saying
Health is wealth. I just
health
don't
is
think
wealth.
wealth is not health, but health is
But no,
wealth.
but if you have the lifestyle where you're able to go to the gym, but like you said, the gym isn't always affordable to everyone. But if you're like, okay, so for example, me, I do have a good lifestyle, but I run between a small business and a full-time job. My ability to spend any time in the gym is minimal. And then comes the idea of again the information that's not available to us. So I always point out some of the simplest things as far as healthy living. One thing is, and I'm just pointing out the simplest thing of all when you say the knowledge of it all. If you open a 1 pound bag of chips and you just eat out of the bag, you're going to eat a lot. But if you pour it into a bowl, a small portion, and that's all you eat, that's portion control. We don't even teach kids that. We don't even teach kids healthy living at any level. And so and it's true because the facts are there, the numbers don't lie. The 1%, I mean, Warren Buffett's 95 now. Jeff Bezos is looking great at his age. Jimmy Carter didn't die till 100. J- Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, died at 99 and a half. I'm not going to make it to 99. I hope I make it to 70 just to be a grandpa. But for a year maybe. But the idea is, and that's just me trying to expounding on what you just put together in beautiful numbers and facts. I'm just generalizing. How do we change that is my question. If How do we make that difference? And then the other thing is how do we close the gap between poverty and wealth? When you say there's this gigantic difference between the 1% and the 5% alone, forget about the 5% and the people on the way bottom. The 1% are significantly in the billions. The 5% now are in the 20 millions. That's a significant difference. So, without government intervention, without an entitlement program, because those are becoming more and more popular and more unrealistic because they're more and more unsustainable. How do we create some kind of momentum that gets to the point you're making? And I might say, if Charlie, if you could jump in and then let Kevin, because I know Kevin's got some great thoughts on this because we've talked about it before. What do you think, Charlie?
No, go ahead, Kevin. I'm interested in
Well,
others'
yeah,
idea
in
here.
my opinion, it just like with most things, yeah. When you look at the system, when you look at society, it's too big. It looks and feels too big to fix because you can't. There's so much you can't control. So let's start with what we can control. We can control the person looking in the mirror, right? And what we need to really, really look at is for all the problems that we see, all the inequality that we see, all the lack of opportunity, all the dystopia that seems to be a building around us. Okay, what we can do is ask ourselves, what choices am I making in my life and how I live my life that's contributing to that, right? Because that's what we can control. How am I contributing to the toxicity of the society in which I live? How am I contributing to the problems that I see? Right. How, and because if we go through that process, we will find that we are empowered to create, starting in our individual circles, starting in how we choose to spend our money, how we choose to exercise our discretion, that is the range of influence that we do have, right? And so what I am saying to you here is first and foremost, right? Competition is a survival technique. The idea that we think that competition is the right way to decide how people can take care of themselves and their family, right? Is the reason why that's wrong is because it frames that into wins and losses. And if you win the competition, you get everything, right? And if you lose the competition, you can expect nothing. Okay, well, that does not, that is the kind of thing that destroys community, right? Because you're competing against somebody and only one of us is going to survive this, right? Okay. And so what I'm saying is we need to look at the virtues that define how we make our choices, because this is what saying we're saying, you know, uh, this is what we're doing every day that's making the society what it is. All the society is the individual choices each of us make, right? We can't control what any decision anyone else makes, but we can control the decisions we make. And so what I do in my life is I try to build community by not looking at the stranger like that, like they're the ones that stand in the way of my family. I look at the stranger as the person who's actually producing the things that I can't produce for myself, right? I don't, I mean, none of us create the food that we eat or the clothes that we wear or the technology that we use, on and on and on. We all are relying on thousands of people we will never know, we cannot control, and and a natural environment that sustains us. If we don't have air, we can't do anything. Okay, so once you realize who you are, who's the person in the mirror, you can then take back your power by saying, okay, I'm not going to make choices. I'm not going to use my my agency. I'm not going to use my agency to contribute to the society, that I don't like. I'm going to build a society that actually serves me and serves everyone I deal with. And how do I do that? By not approaching it from my self-interest. If it doesn't just benefit me, right, right, I'm not going to do it. Well, because guess what? We can't produce the things we need to survive. And so you can't, so how do you, self-interest is self-defeating in that context. And this is what we're doing to ourselves. I mean, literally 100 years ago, right? We were working less hard than we are working today. Why? It's not because we don't know more. It's not because we don't have technology and innovation. It's that the benefits are going to fewer and fewer people. Stop contributing to that. Stop trying to be the millionaire. Stop trying to accumulate more than you could possibly use, right? In a context where there's not, most people don't have enough to even get by, right?
What? I 100% agree, Kevin. I think, and I think there is a connection there to, say, social media and the internet information age, because, you know, people need to be realistic of what their reach really is. And again, it starts with yourself. And then at best, if you can kind of get that under control, working on yourself and maybe your friends and your family, maybe you extend a little bit farther out. But people want to skip that. And that's why things like social media give them this illusion that they're into something bigger, rather than doing something concrete, important in their own life for themselves and their family and their friends and their community. They jump on feeling like they're some part of some cause because they post things on social media, because they wear a certain T-shirt, because they virtue signal a certain way, and they're skipping the important and the valuable things they could contribute by jumping onto some illusionary thing of some false, fake, revolution that they somehow have jumped onto, and they lose years of their life and days where they could be contributing in meaningful ways that would help them spiritually and realistic, concretely in their lives, and help people around them. And if they do a little bit, then they'll say, "Oh, wow, this is pretty good." I feel a lot better about things, and I'm seeing some improvements. But as soon, if we allow technology just to strip that away, and we're not living our lives, and we're not present, we're just part of some virtual community. It'll never get better. Now, and how do you push that? Again, all you can do is try to make small changes in your media environment and hope that creates some type of chain reaction, consistently that you can see positive change. Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you made some great points. I'm always saying, how do we scale the solution, and what is the solution? How do we get this point across to kids? Social media and the whole electronic and IT, we've been taken over by it. And how do we control it? Like Charlie said, we're all looking for this grand thing, and life is fairly simple. It's not that grand. There's only like Charlie said, the one kid that was reviewing toys, he became this giant success story where, but it was a niche. It was a lucky I that what YouTube started. The reason YouTube is, well, the biggest YouTuber till today is a kid opening Christmas presents. In the beginning, his family filmed him opening Christmas presents, and that became one of the biggest YouTube videos viewed ever. And then ultimately, he became a giant YouTuber. But none of us may ever be that.
But even that though, where did it start? Right, it started with family. It started in a small thing with his family and a connection there that caught people's attention. So even that started at a very micro level. Now other people will see that, and rather than create that beginning point, a solid family connection and things like that, they just want to be that. They want to be that kid. How can I make that money? Not how can I do the positive things that led to that type of thing. I don't know anything about that kid, but just in general, I'm using this example. It's like no one wants to do that part. They just want the glitzy part. They want the part that is fed to them, in their feeds and through their through the manipulation. And that I think that's a big problem to see with the kids is that they're missing the early steps. They want to get right to the end there. They want to get, and their minds are so young that they don't really see it. It's very hard for a young mind to understand that. That takes some experience. It takes a mentor. It takes people around them to show them, because absent that, they're not going to learn those lessons. All they're going to see is what appeals to them, and I want that. How can I be like that?
Right, and like Charlie said, I don't know the kid either. I know the story, but the reality is it all started with a family gathering. That's what really matters. And the kid had some nice presents wrapped under the tree, and then they all went and sat at the kitchen table, ate some ham and mashed potatoes and a glass of wine or something. That's what we're all. But we are all looking for this big, huge success story, and isn't there anymore. And my point has always been is like, reaching for that brings you to that point. The people who have reached that have it, but those who are reaching for it and never get it have the anxiety. It's costing them their health and costing them and that struggle, that internal struggle, and that lack of inner peace. Those are the people trying to get to that point that don't have that inner peace. Thankfully, I think all about me, you, Charlie, Kevin, Beth, we all have that inner peace in a way, because we've grown up in a way where we have that, but a lot of kids don't. And then comes the question, which granted is way off to the left field, is teenage suicide and stuff like that. How do we get some of that resolved?
Well, see, Coach, I mean, it's not at that level that we can get it resolved. That's the intractable part. It's too big to fix part, is when you look at the aggregate problem, right? Yeah. And so what Charlie was just referencing, and what I was talking about, is that's the part beyond our control. That's the part where people just sit there and say there's nothing that can be done. Nihilism becomes the thing, right? Within the range that you can control, is you can actually, it doesn't take education to know, how is it that I survive every day? Because this is the problem. All these external influences get us to forget who we are. Because you think it's self-evident that we know how we survive every day, but people act as if they don't. And how we know that that's true is that they don't trust the hands that serve them every day. In other words, none of us produce the things we need to survive every day. Full stop. And if you recognize that you survive every day and you don't produce things that allow you to survive every day, and you can't control the people who do, right? You all of a sudden see it's not that you are powerless, is that you actually exist in a symbiotic, interdependent way. In other words, we all contribute something, right, to this society. We produce something, we specialize, we produce something, and then someone else specializes and they produce something. And it's the accumulation of all those specialties that allows us to survive every day, right? But if you understand that that's the nature of how you exist every day, right, then all of a sudden, all those other people become important. all those other people become essential. Right now, we have a culture that says stranger danger. Right now, we have a culture that says you should think of yourself first and your family, even though yourself first and your family does not support your well-being, does not produce the things you need to survive. It's much broader than that, right? Right. Okay. And so it's starting with who am I? What does it mean to be human? Right? What does it mean? How do I function every day? Can I have a good day without tens of thousands of people who I will never know doing what they do well? Right? Because in the absence of any one of those people doing what they do badly leads to something that happens badly to us, as in we get the salmonella, as in the brakes didn't work right because the mechanic who was working on our car was distracted, right? I mean, on and on and on. Okay. When you realize, when you come back into your own space as to how I actually function, how I actually live, right? It changes your perspective on the importance of other people. And so the common interest, not because it's nice, but because that's how you survive, becomes important. Too many of our decisions right now are rooted in I have to think of myself first. Well, okay, everyone who's defeating you is thinking of themselves first. The billionaires are thinking of themselves first, right? Okay, this is what it leads to. It leads to what we have. So we need to stop this notion of acting as if we live independently. We don't. Nothing in nature lives independently. That's not a weakness. The reason why humanity survived the dinosaurs, survived much stronger predators, is because we as humans have the capacity to coordinate, to specialize our skills and then coordinate it together to defeat a more dangerous, stronger, faster, more vicious predator, right? Okay, modern society has forgotten that, and we are now predators against each other. We are now making prey of each other, right? And so that's where we have to stop. That's where we have to, realizing who we are, what it is to be human, that we can't function separate from each other, right? Is the kind of awakening that then feeds into every decision you make. So if you have a public policy issue, the filter cannot be, how is this going to affect me? The filter has to be, how would this affect us? Right. And until we can get to that, and not from a normative sense, it's not a should. It's not a philosophical pie in the sky. It's how you survive every day. Right. Once
So
you
now,
recognize that.
so now to that point, unless Charlie, do you have anything to share with that? Because I'm going to go on
No,
to
no,
the
no,
next
it's
point.
that's fine.
Okay, so now to that point, I was walking home. Yes, I was walking to my car. Okay, granted, I work at a theme park. It was freezing, and like you said, to that point, I am going home. I know my family's home. I know the house is heated. I'm walking to this freezing car. I am not a fan. I am walking through this freezing weather to get to my car, which will be warm. Right?
Yeah.
I am not a fan of the cold. But really, the only thing going through my mind is all these people, including children,
Yes.
with nowhere to go.
With nowhere to go.
And it's on, and even if it's not this freezing cold, which really is the worst for me, but what if it's this steaming hot in the summer, and there's nowhere to go where you can
Same
mitigate
thing.
the weather with air conditioning. And
Yeah.
so, and that's the only thing really going through my mind. In 10 minutes, in less than 10 minutes, I will have
Yeah.
relief. I will be
Yes.
in a car that has a good heating system. I'm done. From that point on, the cold is no more my issue.
And just imagine
There's
if all you had is a tarp, all you
it,
had is a
it
tent.
cold is their issue all night, and then when they wake up, they've got to somehow get dressed in the cold and carry on with their day in the cold and go back to another cold night. So granted, I beat that point to death. Then there was this idea that you had, because housing is an issue in America. And we've heard about it, and we've heard about it, and we've heard about it. I see it in my own neighborhood. My own neighborhood is a fairly nice neighborhood, but I do know for a fact, off to the left of I-4, people are living in the woods. It's a fact. I see them venturing off from the woods into the 7-Eleven where I get gas, and I buy them a cup of coffee, or I give them $3, whatever's left. I get. So this is a problem. And so you had mentioned, I want you to mention the idea you had about housing because I want Charlie, who's a lawyer, and we're all good thinkers. Man, talk about the housing, the fact that the house is costing so much more than it once did before. But if we can get investors to take part in that investment, so tell us your idea. And that
Well,
would also that would also roll into the whole idea of everybody kind of sharing into the solution, of everybody not necessarily winning, of everybody not necessarily taking ownership of hundreds of rental properties.
no, thank you for that question, Coach. Yes, that we are experiencing, but it's not just housing. We are experiencing a dramatic access issue. So when it relates to housing, right, it is not that we don't have enough housing in America. This is one of the arguments that extreme wealth has propagated through our media, that the solution to affordable housing is to build more housing. We have 120 million single family houses in the country, and only 108 million of them are occupied. Okay, right. Those other 12 million are secondary homes, investment homes, vacation homes, you know, of and such. Okay. What we have is an access to housing problem. We do not have a food shortage in America. What we have is an access to food shortage. We do not have a healthcare facility shortage in America. What we have is an access to adequate healthcare, problem in America. All these things are problems created by the fact that we hoard these resources. Okay. And what makes it worse is these are essential resources that we must have, which in a free market lends themselves to price discrimination. So this is what has happened to housing. So you have people who have multiple houses, right? Yeah, I'm talking for any of you. Okay. In a context where it is a literally a finite resource world. This is not Star Trek Enterprise where you just open up the technology and you push a button and out comes the steak and eggs and stuff like that. No, this is a finite resource world. And so if you have a virtue structure, a value structure that says it's okay for each of us to take as much as we possibly can take. This is why we have shortages. The only reason why we have scarcity of these essential things is because people are hoarding them. We have to get past that, right? Because we are already exceeding the resource capacity of the planet. Right. Okay. Let's put it that way. Okay. So there is no just keep on building houses so that the wealthy can have five houses and the poor person can at least have a house. No, there is you know what? We need to share. There is no, you can't just there's no virtue, there's no value in taking as much as you possibly can take. Right. And just because you earn it, what is the value of that? So yes, I have an idea to address the housing affordability crisis in America. The problem is just like not enough fingers to hold all the breaks in the dam, right? My idea is a stopgap solution that would help make sustainable, affordable housing available for credit qualified middle class families who no longer could afford to buy a house. And this would relieve some of the inflationary pressure on working class folks who are now experiencing food insecurity in America. So this is, so without getting into the weeds of that idea, because I could take, detail, right? I'm saying that's just a stopgap transitional solution. The bigger problem is that we've made gluttony a virtue. The point
Right,
is
but
not
to
to
that
be that
point,
kid who's worth millions and millions of dollars because he is his family. No, we don't need that level of accumulation. What we
no, but
need is enough.
to that point though, it's going to be hard to change that mindset. But you did have
That's the problem. Then
right.
full stop.
It's a
Then it's
significant
just gonna
problem.
break.
Right. And that may be what makes the change. But let's just start off with the idea that if housing were more affordable, people would also, like we said, when people are spending a significant 50, 60% of their income just on housing, there's no money left for food and medicine. So just kick it off with that idea you had on housing in a where the investor takes on a part of the loan.
Yeah, well, okay. So if you acknowledge that since we came out of COVID 2021, the price of housing across the country has escalated in the similar type of fashion that we had in the early 2000s, 2001 to 2006, housing blew up in America. Okay. Well, we experienced the same thing 2021 to 2025. Housing blew up in America. Different reasons, but the fact is the value of a house went, the median value of a house went from $340,000 in January 2021 to $440,000 in January 2025. Okay. Had nothing to do with Biden. It's not politics, it's just economics. Okay. So that happened. And at the same time that that happened, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage went from 2.9%, spiked to 8%, and now it's come back down to about 6.1%. But the fact is it's doubled. So when you take the fact that housing went up, to buy a home went up 30%, and to finance a home doubled. The cost of financing a home doubled. What that did was, for the first time in U.S. history, the median middle class household can no longer afford to buy a house in the average American city. Okay, that's never happened. And what that has done then to the rental market is it captured a level of income that used to be able to afford to buy a house, and it's placed it in the rental market. And so people who own rental properties understand that people who have no other alternative are making a lot of money. They're making house buying money, and they could raise the rent accordingly. So ironically, rent inflation is mirroring the radically high housing inflation, right? So now rents have gone up 30% across the country. The net effect on people whose income hasn't gone up 30% in the country, but who make lower than middle class income, which is 200% of the federal poverty level. For a family of three, that would be $55,000 a year. Okay, so people who are just below the middle class, whose income has not gone up, but the rent has gone up 30%, now, 52% of those households are reporting food insecurity because they're choosing to pay their rent and eat less. Right. Okay. So, how do we solve that problem? Is unless you have a catastrophic collapse in the value of a house that would allow middle class families to afford to buy them,
We don't see
which
that
was
happening.
which is the Great Recession. We don't want to see that happen, right? In terms of the magnitude of loss that would be associated with that. You only have two. You either have to bring the value of housing down, which you don't want, right? Or you have to have the gap between what people can afford, credit qualifying, full income verification, middle class households who used to be able to afford to buy a house. You either cover the gap between the mortgage that they could qualify for and the price of the house, right? That's the other alternative. And so my idea is to get impact investors. Impact investors are a category of investors who are not simply looking to maximize their return on investment. Impact investors are a category of investors who are trying to achieve some sort of goal other than return on investment. They would like a return on investment, but they will sacrifice a market return on investment to achieve certain things. Well, the sustainable debt market is one source where impact investors go to. And in the sustainable debt market, they will accept a lower return on investment to achieve a social justice goal, as in to bridge wealth and income inequality, or to achieve a sustainable goal, to fund the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy in order to mitigate climate change. Okay, so these are the two reasons why impact investors come to the sustainable debt market. Okay, so to that investor, I say, okay, if we could fund the gap if the house has gone up $100,000 and we could put another $30,000 in it to replace the HVAC and the heating and the AC with high energy efficient heat pumps, right? And water heat pumps, and then put solar panels on the house to make it green certified. Oh, okay. If that package costs another $30,000 for the average house in America, plus the $100,000 gap between what a house was in January 2021 and what it is now, right? If as an investor, you could bridge that gap for a credit qualifying middle class family,
So
right?
the impact investor puts up to 130.
Puts up to 130, right? It sits in second position behind the $300,000 mortgage that the household can afford at
That the house
6.1%
buyer,
that the house
can
buyer could afford. Right. Okay. So again, full income verifying, conforming mortgage credit qualified households, right? Okay. They do exist, right? Okay. That person who can afford a $300,000 mortgage for the $400,000 house, right? Okay, they come with their 3% down and their $300,000 mortgage, and the impact investor provides $130,000 that pays to convert the house to green certification and covers that gap. It sits in second position. And what that impact investor is going to get is the IRS break-even rate, which the IRS publishes it every year and stuff like that. And that rate is a function of how long that financing would be out there for. So it's a minimum on a 1 year financing of 4%, and it's a maximum on financing beyond 9 years of 4.9%. But the significance of the IRS break-even rate is that there are no gains, there's no subsidies, there's no tax implications for it. So the impact investor can lend this money at that rate. No one has to recognize a gain, no tax implications. Okay, all right. They get that rate. The home buyer has to refinance that second position loan no longer than 10 years. They have up to 10 years. So this is patient money, right? But it's real estate secured, and the home buyer is fully credit qualified. We know the default rates for fully credited conforming credit, income producing credit is low, low, low default rates. Okay. That we do that. That's Fannie and Freddie. We do that all day long, right? Okay.
Charlie, what do you think of that idea?
I do. I like, I was just made me think, I think this is along the same lines that, in general, and these are very general terms, but if you could create a system where you take you get investors and say, listen, you're going to invest this money. You are guaranteed not to lose. And you are also guaranteed not to gain. And we'll balance those two out. So you are really you're not sacrificing anything other than allowing us to borrow your money for the time being. And what you get out of this is the satisfaction of doing something positive at no risk.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah, okay, that was the sense I was getting. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like, because it's a wonderful concept, because you're saying, listen, we're not asking you to risk anything. We're just saying you're not going to gain anything either, because we got to balance out the possibility of it going down by taking the possibility of going up. And so what you're doing is you're really just lending your resources for a positive outcome, costing you nothing, risking nothing. The only possible risk you could say is like, well, I could have taken that money and that during that period of time invested in something I would gain money. Okay, that would be an argument. It's not a very positive one, but
that's why you're going after impact investors, because a standard investor, you're right. A standard investor is just looking for return on investment, right? We're talking about people who make enough money,
yeah,
right? Who they can actually try to do something. That's not their primary goal. And to give you some idea of how much money is available out there, in 2024, we don't have the 2025 statistics yet. In 2024, the sustainable debt market, investors who took a lower return on investment to achieve these goals, right? The total fundings was $1.74 trillion. Okay, so there is enough accumulated wealth in this country to solve these problems. And there are enough people who have demonstrated they're willing to accept a lower return on investment. Their only interest is, will it address the problem? Because one of the horrible truths of the last 50 years is that wealth has co-opted. There are cottage industries of people who are supposed to be helping underserved and underprivileged people. And what Wealth has done in those efforts has bribed, essentially, people have made wealth on helping people who never get the help. Right. There are countless stories in California about homelessness and how billions of dollars that are supposed to be allocated to address homelessness in California that has only made wealthy people out of the people who administer those programs, and it doesn't move the needle. Okay, so the impact investors are smart enough to say, no, 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 we're not funding something that's only going to help the sham people who say they want to help. We will fund it if it actually is going to achieve that goal. And the sustainable debt market is managed by the commercial banks and Wall Street to make sure the financial instrument goes. In other words, all the discount is tied to the benefit. It's tied to the social justice goal being achieved. And if it's not being achieved, then you don't get the discount, right? That will attract the impact investor. Say, okay, yes, what I'm buying for my lower return on investment is to make
The
a
greater good.
a greater good, to make a
Greater good.
sustainable, affordable house available to a credit qualified middle class family. They could not buy the house. And oh, by the way, we need to convert these houses to renewable energy anyway. I mean, it's not like we don't need to do this. So it achieves both those goals. That's the appeal. And I think that I'm hoping that we can actually, it's easier once you get someone to take the first step. This is like, who wants to be a first mover? It takes a certain courage to be a first
But to
mover.
that point, there's a lot of money out there to actually make that happen,
Oh, there's enough money to make it happen.
and
Yes.
there are those who want to be the first one and the next one and the next and the next. And this is a great solution. There are also getting right back into the lack. We're reducing the hoarding. We're reducing the enormous gain after enormous gain. We're actually going over the overall good, which I like to joke. I don't like to joke. I said one time I called Kevin's into this giant idea of the world being a giant kibbutz, but it's not a bad idea that we create this momentum and the money's there and the initiative's there by you, Kevin, who could get the word out. And then comes the fact that if people are living in affordable housing, if people are living in housing they can afford, then they can afford food and medicine. Then and that's why I keep wanting to get that point across. And Charlie he jumped in and he said he loves the idea. Charlie's a super intelligent person. I've known him for over 30 years. He's a lawyer, he's a teacher, he's dedicated to everything he does, extremely dedicated to everything he does. He was an extremely dedicated teacher because he was working for peanuts and he didn't always have the best kids on his side. And he did a great job. And now I don't know his particular position as a lawyer because we don't spend much time together, but I think it's great that another person endorses it. And all we've ever heard from people who we bring this point to, who you bring this point to, is it's a great idea. And
You got to get that first person or those first group of people, and then you got to celebrate them. You got
Oh
to
yeah.
celebrate them. You got to give them that, and that's free. That doesn't cost anything.
Anything.
And
Yeah.
people love that.
So
I don't care how rich you are. People love that. People
love
like
Jeff getting
to
that
be
credit. Well,
seen as benevolent and responsible and stewards of their community. So I think it's a great idea. It just needs to be pushed. Unfortunately, guys, I've got to go, but I'm going to leave on that super positive note. So it's a great
thank you,
idea.
Charlie. Thanks.
Charlie.
I got to start wrapping it up too. It was an incredible conversation because like Kevin challenged us, let's not do too much politics. I did want to get into politics, but we're going to do that again next week. Or 2
Hey,
weeks.
we'll do it again next week.
It will
We'll
always
get
be
on
there.
it.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
gotta go.
Charlie.
Great
Thanks so
Take care,
talking to you.
much.
Charlie.
Have a good weekend. What's left
Kevin,
of it.
that was great. Thank you.
Indeed, a pleasure, a pleasure. Hey, Coach, there is a good news follow-up story that we should keep on the podcast, so keep the tape rolling
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
Is that okay? So who's that first person? I am trying to pitch the new mayor of Seattle, Katie Wilson,
Katie
right?
Wilson.
I have proposals with her affordable housing team to make Seattle the proof of concept city, first in the nation, to where we could do 9,500 homes a year in Seattle, raising the money, price gap agreement, raising the money from the sustainable debt market It would, I mean, 9,500 homes. The gap in Seattle, because the market is so expensive, would be about $240,000. So for 9,500 homes, it would be a $2.2 billion bond. But the thing about it is, it if we can make sustainable, affordable houses for ownership available to middle class families, median middle class families in Seattle, one of the most expensive markets in the United States, we could do it everywhere. It is, and so she is she's a new mayor. She's a social justice warrior. She's not a historical politician. I know her lens is to try to basically reverse the regressive taxation that we've had over the last 40 years, which means go after the rich and tax them. My pitch to her is that that can't be your only tool, because all you're going to do is then make enemies of the people who have the resources to help. So if so by offering them an investment opportunity that they can choose, they can exercise their discretion to participate in, gives you another tool in your tool shed to handle a problem, right? That people in the local community, there's so much money in Seattle. I mean, this is where it's high tech. I mean, there is a high concentration of billionaires in Seattle, right? We can raise the 2.2 billion to the sustainable debt market to do this in Seattle. And how I've adjusted it for the Seattle market is this: a participation rate fee. We can charge the real estate listing agent and the real estate buying agent, who usually splits 4 points between them on a
You
sale.
charge them one of the points?
We could charge them a half a point
Half
each,
a point. Half a point each,
half a
one of the
point
point.
each,
Yeah.
which makes it 1 point on a transaction that they would never get because the person couldn't afford the house without the subsidy.
On
So
a
we're
lot of
creating
transactions that
a
they would
lot
never
of transactions. So we're asking them, yeah, take a half a point shave each of you. That's 1 point, and charge the home buyer 1 point, for participating in a program. In other words, you're in Seattle, it's an $800,000 house. So you're going to buy an $800,000 house, put $40,000 worth of solar panels and upgraded heat and AC in the house. You're going to get $240,000. You're going to do a $600,000 mortgage and put 3% down, $24,000 down payment for an $840,000 green certified house. You could pay 1 point for that, right? So that 1 point from the buyer and a half point each from the agents, that's 2 points. For the $800,000 house, that's $16,000. So the middle class household who is renting now, and now they're going to buy this house for the apartment or house that they're renting, the $16,000 fee goes to subsidize the rent for that apartment so that a working class family can come in and get. So let's say that middle class household was paying $3,000 a month for a two-bedroom apartment, right? Okay. You could take the $16,000 participation fee and subsidize that $3,000 a month rent and ask the homeowner who's renting the apartment for $3,000 a month to participate in it. We can get the $3,000 rent knocked down to $2,000, which would make it more affordable to a person who's not middle class to rent it. Okay, see, so for
So
every
you're covering a lot of bases here.
yes,
And then
the idea.
the other idea with the discount is volume for a discount. So that's wholesale, which is still it happens. Not that you don't know this, but I'm just
Yes,
saying for people
yes.
listening, they're going to lose a point, yeah, half a point each, but they're going to get the volume in return in
Oh,
business they would never seen. They couldn't have
well,
closed the
here's the
deal
thing. It
otherwise.
it 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 is the housing market is frozen. Redfin, Redfin did their national agent survey, and the most recent national agent survey said that 71% of all active agents in the United States did not have one house sale last year. Not one.
I can imagine because
71%. Okay. So they're not doing any business, right?
right.
So this is going to unfreeze the market. by allowing people who could afford to buy, allowing people who are credit qualified to buy a house that the only reason they can't buy is because they've been priced out. This covers the gap without collapsing the value of the house. And it's at market. So that all the commission is not based on a discounted sales price. It's based on the, in
The fact
Seattle,
that
the
they're not doing
800,
anything anyway.
and they're not doing anything anyway. And the house is going to be sold. The seller wants to sell if they can get full price, right? They're going to get full price. It's at the $800,000 level. You see what I'm saying? So
Yes,
it
sir.
is win, win, win. The mortgage broker who's going to do the mortgage is getting a mortgage that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. The agents are getting a sale that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten, and the home buyer is getting a house that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And what makes that possible is the impact investor, which is what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve a social justice goal to allow a family to buy a home that they can't afford. But they're credit qualified. In other words, we're not talking about non-income verified. We're not talking about speculative risk. We're not talking about subprime. We're talking about core 700 credit score plus, income verified, stable income, money in the bank. That household has been priced out. And there's enough of them. There are millions of them, right? That will unfreeze the national housing market, right? And the best thing about it is once we do it in Seattle and show that it works, we could scale it to the statewide. So for a
So this
state
is a
like,
targeted approach, which is huge,
yeah,
and I think it could work. And you got to get with Katie Wilson. I want to say this. I want to wrap it up on this point. I have another guest that wants to join the podcast with you, Saul Spady, who is not exactly a Katie Wilson fan. He said, "I need to join this podcast with Kevin." You ready for that?
I'm ready for it. Yes, I would love
Okay,
to. Tell
let me get this going, and I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna set that up for. Can you
uh,
do Wednesday night?
yeah, I could do Wednesday night.
I'm
I
gonna
could do,
see if he can do Wednesday.
yeah, I could do Wednesday night. Yeah, because
Let me see
I'll
if
be
he can
going
do it
to
because I
see.
want to get you and him together. Because
Tell
his
me
name
about him a little bit. Is that okay?
Saul Spady, yeah, he's been an activist. He's a great guest. He's a political candidate. As a child, he was doing petition drives with his parents. He sent me a link when you go on ChatGPT about him. His parents were in the Seattle area, and they fought the good fight and ultimately got charter schools in Seattle. At
Okay.
and they also own Dick's Burgers. I don't know if you've heard of them. His
I'm not
parents.
sure if I'm not sure
I
if I
think
know
they're in
Dick's Burgers.
Seattle. I'll
Okay.
try to get you Saul Spady's information. He's been a great guest, and he worked hard with his parents on political activism. They brought charter schools to Seattle. Took them years. I think they spent about 15 years on the initiative, and now they were number 4 in the country. And then, but he wanted to get with you on the podcast and talk about Katie Wilson, and he was hoping for her great success. He wants to get with her too. So I was like, man, we got to get you two together.
Let's do it. No, that would
Do
be exciting. That
So
would
I'm
be
gonna
so
text him in
exciting.
a minute, and I'll try and text you too. I'll do a group chat between you and Saul, and then I'll have him send you his info too.
Sounds good,
I'll
my
let
friend.
him
Yeah, no,
send you his info.
I'd be happy to participate. Let's see when Saul is available.
I'm gonna do that
Wednesday
right now.
night would work.
I'm gonna put
Wednesday night
together.
would work for me this week because I got to go up to Seattle on Tuesday. I'm going to stay up there and come back on Wednesday, but I'll be back for Wednesday night, so
So
that'd be
say
fine.
7 p.m. Eastern, right? Is that okay?
That Oh yeah, that would be great.
7 p.m.
Yes.
Eastern. Okay, let me text him now. So we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna. So this has been the political no brainer podcast. But actually, this may be a chairs across the aisle podcast because it was really not political. So I'm gonna have to get with Laura on that, and then I'm gonna Kevin wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, Coach, because this is Super Bowl week, I want you to wrap it up because I have a question for you.
Go
Because
ahead.
I'm this, like I said, I'm celebrating sports in this week's episode of Breadcrumbs, right? And so I am listing my all-time top 5 favorite sports highlights or sports events, and my all-time worst sports highlights or events. So I have my 5 and my 5. So just off the top of your head, because yeah, I know you're a sports guy too. Okay, Give me some of your, you don't have to do 5 and 5. Give me a couple of your your favorite all-time sports highlights and your worst, just, I mean, your heart broke when it happened. Yeah, a couple of those. Do you have that?
So yeah, so number one would be Reggie Jackson hitting 3 home runs in the World Series
Against the Dodgers. Yes,
against the
yes,
Dodgers.
yes. That last home run hit dead center field into the seats where no one sits in the black and center field, Yankee Stadium. I remember. Yes.
Number two would be the Islanders winning the Stanley Cup.
Oh, Bobby Nystrom game-winning goal in 1980 against the Philadelphia Flyers. Yeah.
And then let me think.
Are you an Island fan?
I grew up in Long Island, so yeah, I'm an Islanders fan.
I'm
Yeah,
a big
absolutely.
Islander fan.
Yeah,
I grew
I
up an
grew up in
Islander
Long Island.
fan.
I was there when
And,
they won it. I mean, I was
and
walking up Hempstead Turnpike, and it was the whole town just went nuts, and
the
it
Nassau
was
Veterans
really
Memorial
neat.
Coliseum. That's right. That's my Mecca. I'm with you,
And
brother. Al Arbor, Mike Bossy, Brian Chachier.
I
You
and
know,
I gotta say, it's not as athletic as it should be, but Bruce Springsteen doing a halftime show at the Super Bowl was pretty freaking neat. But that could be a top moment, but it wasn't a big athletic moment. The worst
how
was
about a heartbreak moment? Something that something that
uh
that just, oh my God, I can't
I
believe
think a
this happened.
heartbreak moment would be for me. I shouldn't say it because my son is a huge Giants fan, but it was when they won the Super Bowl in the last 32 seconds of the game. I didn't see that coming when the Giants won the Super Bowl in like the last. Do you remember that game, that Super Bowl?
Was it against New England or who
Yeah,
was it
and they
against?
ah God, I was
Which Yeah, no. Well, think about that because no, I hear you because I can tell you my all time mine no I so some of mine I don't want to give my all time, but some of my no, I could do it here. My all time was the greatest comeback in Major League Baseball history was the 1978 New York Yankees, where in August on August they were 14 games behind the Boston Red Sox, and they caught them. And by the end of the season, they had to play an extra game. They had to play a 163rd game in Boston because the Yankees and the Red Sox were tied. But the Yankees had come back 14 games, in August, and Bucky Dent hit the big home run. They were down 2-0 going into, I believe, the eighth inning, and Bucky Dent hit a 3-run home run over the Green Monster, to give the Yankees a 3-2 lead. Reggie Jackson ultimately hit another home run, and the Yankees won the game 5-4 and stuff like that, and then went on to win the World Series in '78 against the Dodgers again and stuff like that. So that's my all-time greatest highlight was that season because that was the greatest comeback in Major League Baseball history was the Yankees that year. But my heartbreak, as growing up as a Cowboy fan, was the '78. I mean, the 1975 Super Bowl. It was a Cinderella year for the Cowboys, and and so they're playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were just this. The Steelers had won the Super Bowl the year before. The Steelers are a great team. I have a tremendous respect for Chuck Noll and all, Terry Bradshaw and the whole, But I was a Cowboy fan, and there was third down from the 11-yard line in a critical part of the game, and the Cowboys were in a spread formation with Scott Laidlaw as the single running back in the backfield. And Roger Staubach was under center, so he wasn't from the shotgun. And he does a play action fake to Scott Laidlaw. And Scott Laidlaw comes in, and Jack Lambert released like a missile in the middle. And he was intent on killing Roger Staubach. I mean, Lambert is a Hall of Famer. And Scott Laidlaw threw his body into Jack Lambert. And it was like an explosion, but it stopped Lambert. Lambert literally got hurt on the play. I'm sure Scotty Laidlaw, that took 5 years off his life. Because Lambert was coming in like a missile. But that released Staubach on the play action fake to where he had time. And he looked into the end zone, and there by himself was Jackie Smith. Jackie Smith is a Hall of Fame tight end who played his entire career with the St. Louis Cardinals, and that this was his last season of his career. And he got to play with the Cowboys, and they were going to go to the Super Bowl. So he was one of the remarkable Super Bowl stories that they tell about individual players. Here was a player who had played with the Cardinals, had never gotten to a Super Bowl, was a Hall of Fame type, is going to be a Hall of Famer and stuff like that. And now he's with the Cowboys, and maybe he'll win a Super Bowl. And Jackie Smith, so Staubach tosses this soft toss into the end zone. I swear, coach, you could have caught this pass with your left hand, one hand, like this. I mean, Jackie Smith somehow what he did was he squeezed his hands too early and it hit the outside of his hands and he dropped it in the end zone.
Oh,
Okay, I got the YouTube video link for this play
you
that
gotta
I'm gonna
send me that.
put.
You gotta send me
Oh
that.
yeah, and so the announcer. Okay, if you remember Tom Landry, very stoic. Tom Landry didn't react to
Oh,
anything. Tom Landry's
with
on the
the toad
sideline
hat.
like this.
Toad hat.
Tom Landry was, I mean, Roger Staubach couldn't believe it. The announcer said, Jackie Smith, he must be the sickest man in America. It
Poor
was
guy.
that bad. And so the next play, the Cowboys kicked a field goal, but they lost the game 21-17 to the Steelers. So that 4-point difference was the
That would have
game,
been it. That
right?
would have been
That was it. So that is the one that wakes me up in the middle of the night. So I can't believe he dropped that ball.
it.
I almost think if he just let it hit his chest, it would have stuck. It was too soft. It was all by himself. It was a beautiful play. And Scotty laid a little sacrifice so much to make sure that Lambert didn't kill, Starbuck. And so yeah, so that was my all-time like heartbreak, and there's others. I got one for the Seattle Seahawk fans since they're in the Super Bowl this week and stuff like that. My fifth worst sports highlight was was Wilson's interception against the New England Patriots at the end of the game that cost Seattle the Super Bowl against the Patriots. Do you remember the play when they were on the 1 yard line and Wilson in the Super Bowl threw the interception?
I think I remember that game.
Okay, it was okay. So Seattle
I
was losing
didn't
by
watch that game, but I remember hearing about it. I did not watch that
Seattle
game.
was losing. They were losing by about 4 points, and they were at an end of game drive. Less than 2 minutes left, and Wilson did a beautiful pass down the right sideline to their wide receiver from the 50-yard line or so. And it got them down to the 5 yard line, first and goal, less than a minute left in the game, right? They're down by 4. Beast mode, their running back, has 120 yards rushing. He's been killing the Patriots. Okay. On first and goal from the 5, they hand it to beast mode, and he gets it down to the 1 yard line. Okay. So, and Seattle has timeouts. So they call a timeout. There's like 20 something seconds left or whatever. It's second down and goal from the 1. Okay. Brady is on the sideline. The camera finds Brady. His helmet is off. His head is in his hands because he knows it's over. Right. And what do the Seahawks do? They come out in the spread formation, double wides on each side with a single back in the backfield, right? And they call a quick slant to the slot receiver on the right-hand side. They call a quick slant, right? And what happens is the cornerback covering that wide receiver intercepts the ball in the end zone. And that's how the Patriots win the game. The tragedy of that call was that it was impossible, unless the cornerback fell down, it was impossible for the cornerback not to do what they did. Because, okay, on the 1 yard line, a quick slant is a timing pattern. So when Wilson took the snap, he stepped 1 step with his left foot, 1 step with his right foot, and then he throws it to the spot because it's that quick. He's on the 1 yard line. He's throwing it right in the middle of the end zone and stuff like that. It's a timing pattern. They practice this, that he's hitting a spot, right? Because he doesn't have enough time for the receiver to get there and then him throw it to him. There's not enough time. Okay. So that's what Wilson did. He did left step, right step, throw it to the spot. The cornerback covering the wide receiver is already in the end zone. And the end zone is only 10 yards deep. So there's a safety right behind him, right? The cornerback covering the wide receiver, okay, as the wide receiver comes off the line of scrimmage, when the wide receiver takes his 2 steps and with his outside foot cuts to the inside, the cornerback has only one play on the 1 yard line, and that's to jump the route and go underneath the wide receiver. And the reason why is if the wide receiver releases behind him, the safety is right there. So from the 1 yard line, the cornerback can cut underneath the play. And so the spot that Wilson threw to, the cornerback was there first. Why? Because they had no other choice. The only way to cover that quick slant, because the wide receiver took the 2 steps and cut in, was to jump the route. And that's exactly what the cornerback did. It wasn't a great play. It was his only play. Now, if this play was called from the 10 yard line, and now you have 20 yards to cover, the quarterback can't just jump the route because there's enough space for the receiver to go behind him and Wilson to hit him right behind him, right? But from the 1 yard line, there isn't enough space, and the only play the cornerback can make is that. And so this is why, on an X's and O's basis, it was the worst possible call. Emmitt Smith described the play. Emmitt Smith, Hall of Famer, described the play as the worst call in Super Bowl history. Because beast mode, all they had to do was hand it to the beast mode. They had the timeouts, handed he knocked it from the 5 to the 1. He would have gotten in on the next play. It was over. And instead they threw it in. I mean, it was the craziest. So that's my fifth. I mean, so I don't even know how Seattle can make up for it. But I wish them good luck this Sunday in the Super Bowl. But that is because I can't stand. I'm sorry. I
love it. I love it. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't see the game. I did hear they won it in the last seconds, but I didn't see the game.
That was one Super Bowl. The Patriots.
Now you got to send me that play.
Yes. And the thing is, so for my 5 all-time best and 5 all-time worst, I have all the YouTube links that I'm attaching so that the fans can have it. So this is a sports celebration episode, and then I get into breadcrumbs about, it's fun when it's on the field, but when you take it out here, then it becomes a blood sport. So
it's a blood sport now, boy. Kevin, I'm going to see you Wednesday. I'm going to get Saul Spady on the chain link. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin Howard, author of the 28
Onward at Last,
the 2024 election edition.
That's exactly
and it's a great book. I'm always reading it. It's like not a Bible to me, but I'm always reading it. I'm always digging it.
Well, I appreciate it, Coach. And you all take care. Thank you, everyone, for listening to we're coming across the aisle?
Share across the aisle.
Share across the aisle.
I'm not the only one that forgets something on this show. Share across the aisle. Thank you.
Indeed. Take care, Coach. Be well.
Take care, Kevin. Thank you.